This is the Tech Phantom, and this is episode 19 of this walkthrough. And this is the second of 3 videos that are going to cover the downloadable content in quite a bit of depth. So in the last video, we left off right at this spot where we were about to pick up a treasure item. And I noticed that I made a mistake on the previous video, guys. I apologize. I was talking about a sorcery that we picked up, which was Dark Cloud, but I gave you the wrong explanation of that item. And as you see me peek at a crystal lizard there that I'm not going to be getting in this playthrough. But I told you that we're coming up to a little bit of a tricky area, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to equip a magical shield, and I'm also going to equip Howell's equipment, which has pretty good magic defense and higher physical defense. And that's because this next area here is a little bit of a crossfire point, and you are most likely going to get hit with 1 or 2 shots from that projectile attack. And it packs a punch. Not only will it damage you, it will also reduce your stamina. So that's why I went ahead and I equipped Hobbles, just to give me a better chance to make sure that I'm able to clear this area. But you can. I have not tried the Ring of Fog or Hidden Body, and that might be a little bit useful in this area here. Alright, so we are going to pick up an item, and that is Dark Orb. And the description of this item is going to tell you that it was a sorcery that was made by a nearly crazed sorcerer from Oolacille that was tainted by the dark, and that unlike standard sorceries, it has momentum, it has weight, and it's most likely due because of the humanity, the human souls that this spell possesses. Now in the previous video I told you the same thing, and obviously that is incorrect. In the previous video we picked up the Dark Fog sorcery, and the description of that item says that humanity, strangely enough, is poisonous to humans and to the undead, and perhaps a statement on the fact that humans can be very cruel to each other. So I apologize for mixing up the 2 descriptions, but the bottom line is that in both cases, the sorcerers in Oolacille, the sorcerers that are going dark, they are making spells that have different characteristics. They are using humanity in the spells, so they're a little bit like pyromancies, because pyromancers use their humanity and turn them into pyromancies. But anyway, these spells have weight to them. At least the Dark Orb projectile spell has weight to it. Alright, so we are going to come up to another area, and this is a very important item here. So the developers actually went ahead and put a little note. It's a very obvious one that I actually missed in my very first video. I thought I was being trolled, but it's the developers want you to equip some light, and that will allow you to get the silver pendant. And this is where the time paradox is coming to play again, because the silver pendant was given to Artorias for facing the abyss, and it's an ancient treasure of Anor Londo. And supposedly it deflects the dark of the abyss, especially in its magic forms, so it can be used to protect you from the Dark Orb and the Dark Fog spells. So the paradox is that we don't know if Artorias was given the silver pendant in preparation for going into the abyss, or if it was a reward for traversing the abyss and stopping or trying to stop the dark raids. Now, to me, it makes more sense that it was a reward and that he did traverse the abyss at least twice. But that is open to speculation. And in the world of Dark Souls, I can be wrong or I can be right, just like you can if you pick your favorite theory. And that's one of the beauties of the game. Alright, so we come back to the area where we fought Artorias, and we find the third guard or Knight of Lord Gwyn, and that is the Loreblade Karen. And she recognizes that we have his soul, and she asks us for his soul. And we say no, and she says, I understand, it's a little bit presumptuous of me to ask. Now, it's interesting, there was some cut dialogue where she, instead of asking for his soul, she asked for the Ring of the Covenant. She recognized that you had it in your inventory, and she would ask for it. But they decided to go the soul route instead of going the ring route. But there is some unused dialogue. Anyway, Karen will give you her weapons in exchange for Artorias' soul. And she is very devoted to Artorias. Obviously, she's grieving at his tomb. But I've decided to fight her, and that's because she will not only drop her weapons, but she will also drop her armor. So we can have her weapons, her armor, and the soul of Artorias if we take her out, instead of just getting her weapons if we trade the soul of Artorias with her. Alright, so then she said a couple of things that are really interesting in her dialogue. She said, you humans. And she kept repeating it, you humans, you humans, you humans. And she was tying humans with violence, which is a little ironic because she's a she's a murderer. She likes to she brings fear into the enemies of Lord Gwyn. But anyway, she is not a human. So she is a divine being, just like Artorias and just like the other gods that inherit Anor Londo. And at the end of her dialogue, she also says, "Oh my dear Artorias." And throughout the initial dialogue, she refers to Artorias as a dear friend or companion, but at the end she says, "My dear Artorias." So it's to me, it's a little bit of a hint that she was probably in love with Artorias. It may have been unrequited, but I think that that she was in love. Now, the reason she was elevated to be a guard, a part of the guard of Lord Gwyn, or to be a knight of Lord Gwyn, is because she was so accomplished at being a Lord's Blade. She was so good at her job that she actually received a porcelain mask, which was a special mask that signified her her standing in the Lord's Blades. And I think because of that reason, she was elevated, and she became a knight. All right. So then the other interesting thing is that we've met 3 out of the 4 knights of Artorias, and there's only one left. So we're hoping that we have a chance to meet that 4th knight as we continue through the downloadable content. All right. So we come back and we talk to Chester, and he's a little bit miffed at us because we defeated him in his Black Knight form. But he will talk to us, and he is impressed that we killed Artorias. And the reason that he's impressed is because he was not able to do it. He was afraid to cross the fog gate, which is why it is that he's standing here. Now, he is also going to tell us something that is really, really important. He is going to tell us where the abyss came from. And he says that it was Oolacille that brought it upon themselves. They were fooled by the toothy serpent, so either Frampt or Cath, and they upturned the grave of primeval man. So they were digging or looking for the grave of primeval man, and they disturbed them, and primeval man sort of came forth, and it turned out the primeval man was a beast of the dark, or was Manus, the father of the dark, and the spread of the abyss started at that point. So maybe it was Cath that set this whole thing in motion, or Frampt set this whole thing in motion. Now, the other thing that Chester said, which is one of the most clever pieces of dialogue that I have seen so far, And you guys may want to go back and rewind it, since we're no longer talking to Chester. Obviously, we're fighting some dogs here. But he says something like, "Does it really matter to you and I? Does it really care?" And what he's talking about are the events. After he tells us that Oolacille brought this calamity upon itself, he says, "Does it really matter? Can you, do you and I really make a difference, or those events make a difference to us?" And he also says it's history to us, and that's because we're both time travelers. We're both from the future, so these events have already happened, and their consequences have already made themselves show in our time. So again, this whole time travel thing, it could really blow your mind if you let it, and you can kind of run wild. And that is why time travel is sort of staple of fantasy or science fiction, because you can go a whole bunch of different directions with it. But I thought it was some of the cleverest piece of dialogue, that he knows that we're both time travelers, and he says, what happened here already happened. Does it really matter to you and I? Because it's already happened, and we were born in the future. All right, but enough about time travel paradoxes. So we're continuing to search, and we come in contact with the same dragon that we saw in the Royal Woods. And if you try to map this area of Oolacille with Darkroot Basin, this is actually where we fought the Hydra, and you could see what the waterfalls looked like initially. So this is our first encounter with Kalameet, and a little bit of a spoiler here, guys. He will instantaneously kill you. So I'm going to pick up this treasure, and then I'm going to very quickly use a homeward bone, because I didn't want to lose my humanity, and I didn't want to lose my 20,000 souls, or however number of souls that I had. So sorry about that, a little bit of a spoiler. But if you try to pick up that treasure, if you try to confront Kalameet, he will kill you. So again, this is another indication that we are in the past, because there are dragons in the past. But we are not so far back in the past that the world is full of dragons, and the war between Gwyn and the dragons is raging. It's sometime after that, and not all of the dragons died. Apparently there are still some dragons, and I mean that's obvious, because in our time, in the world of Dark Souls before the downloadable content, there were dragons at that time as well. Seath was a dragon. We also encounter a couple of undead dragons. And there is another dragon in a location that we will see later in the game. All right, so again, all of it's really interesting. All of the heads on these statues have been removed. So that's a neat thing that the developers did. That to signify the taint of the dark, the statues no longer have their heads, and that is sort of a parallel to the residents and the sorcerers of Oolacille losing their heads and instead having bloated heads. So we picked up a key in the previous video, and we used that key to climb the tower, and we find this giant. And this is my favorite NPC in the game. I know a lot of you guys like Artorias. I happen to like this gentleman even more. And this is Gough, and this is the fourth and final Knight of Lord Gwyn. And he actually thanks us for killing Artorias, because he knows that Artorias was tainted by the dark, and that it was not a good way for a Knight of Lord Gwyn to live, to be tainted by the dark and to no longer be divine, but instead to be a creature of the dark. So this gentleman, Gough, is the most honorable and true knight that you will encounter in the game. And his dialogue is incredibly well written and incredibly true to his personality. And he is also carving the stone carvings that we have picked up in a couple of different locations through the game. And if you read the descriptions of those carvings, it will tell you that he puts an incantation on them, and he imparts a different kind of an emotion. And when you drop them on the ground, they actually speak based on the emotion that was carved by Gough. Alright, so Hawkeye Gough is also going to ask us about Kalameet, and he says, is Kalameet making your life difficult? And the answer is yes, especially if you try to attack him the first time you met him, where it will be an instant kill. And this is my favorite piece of dialogue. He says, what is bravery without a dash of recklessness? When we answer yes to the question that, you know, we don't care what it takes, even if it's a really difficult and trying battle ahead, we are going to soldier on. And then, even though he is blind, or he cannot see, and we know that because his helm has something in the eyes, and we don't know if it's dried blood or what, and he's kind of reaching for his bow. But we are going to see some of the skill that made Hawkeye Gough legendary. And he is going to pick up his great bow, and he is going to use a very, very large arrow. And he is going to hit Kalameet. So now Kalameet apparently is not mortally wounded, but he is damaged enough that we are going to be able to battle him. And then Hawkeye comments on that fact. He comments on how good the shot was and that the bat is grounded. And now he says, alright, the rest is in your hands. Good luck. And another great line, dragon slain, knighthood's highest calling. So this is sort of a, you know, the culmination of knighthood. A true, you know, the true knight seeks to slay dragons. That is the ultimate calling, or the ultimate objective for a knight. And then he tells us a little bit more about Kalameet, and he actually will not give us any more dialogue until we have battled Kalameet, which is what we are going to do in the next section of the video, guys. So we are going to go to the area where Kalameet was grounded by Hawkeye Gough, and we are going to go try to take him on. Alright, so we are back at the fog door, and we are going to take on the boss here on Kalameet, now that the bat has been grounded, as Hawkeye Gough said. And actually, this is my second attempt at Kalameet, and my first attempt, guys, I was trying to get the tail cut, and it went about 7 or 8 minutes, and I kind of lost patience. And I just decided to let Kalameet kill me, and this is my second attempt. So I'm not going to go for the tail cut. I do have a video in my channel in the form of a movie that explains the story of Gough, Hawkeye Gough, and Kalameet, and in that video I do show you how to get the tail cut. And the tail cut will give you the obsidian sword, which is an excellent sword. It has very low stat requirements, only 20 and 16, and after you've powered it up, it will do 480 physical damage. And it is similar to the Drake sword in that it doesn't have any scaling, so you know, once it's only going to do 480 damage. But the really nice thing about the obsidian sword is that it can be enchanted. So if you are an intelligence build, or if you are a faith build, or if you just want to invest your points on something other than strength and dexterity, the obsidian sword is a great option for you. Plus, it has a an area of effect attack. When you do the two-handed strong attack, you will push out a wave of dark magic, similar to the attacks that Kalameet is doing. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Kalameet while the fight's going on. So Kalameet is one of the ancient dragons, and he is very, very powerful, very, very strong, and he is actually feared by Lord Gwyn, by Anor Londo. So this is one of the dragons that Lord Gwyn did not kill, and that did not want to mess with because he was so powerful. And I think that power comes from his calamity attack, and you are not going to see it in this video because I guess I stayed away from the area where I would trigger that attack. But he has an attack where he sits on his hind legs, and then he emits a high-pitched shriek, and there is an orange sort of aura or glow around his head, and there's an area near him that if you're caught, you are automatically sort of brought up close to his head, close to his eye, and the eye will put you in a calamity status. And when you are in calamity status, you will take twice the damage that you normally would. So this makes you very, very vulnerable. So I think this is the reason why Lord Gwyn feared Kalameet. It's because he could do a calamity attack. And as a matter of fact, you see that after you defeat him, you do get the calamity ring. And the description tells us that it is enchanted by the orange eye, that Kalameet is the bringer of calamity, and that whoever's wearing this ring receives double the damage. So for those of you that want to do challenge playthroughs, here's your opportunity. You can go ahead and wear the ring, and it's basically like playing in, if you were in a new game, it would be like playing in NG++ or something like that, because you are going to be a lot more vulnerable to damage, and if you get hit by a strong enemy, you are most likely going to die. Alright, so here's some of the loot in the play area here. And one thing we should point out is that if you map this area to Darkroot Basin, you could see that this is where we fought the Hydra. This is where we found Dusk, and we can tell that because the waterfalls that are sort of in the background. So, and you can actually remap the areas in the downloadable content with the areas in the original game, and it's kind of fun to do that. But you know, the DLC is basically a reskinning, a retexturing of the areas in the original game. Alright, so now that we've taken care of Kalameet, let's go pay a visit with Gough and see what he has to say. And by the way, Kalameet was the bringer of calamity, so I think that's where his name comes from. I think the developers looked at the word calamity and then played around with it, and out came out Kalameet. So I think Kalameet and calamity are related. Alright, so like I said, we are going to go pay Gough a visit. We're gonna tell him that we have taken care of Kalameet, who was a very tough customer indeed. And here we find him carving away. And he already knows that we have defeated Kalameet. And he is going to give us the Lord Gwyn's blessing, which is actually very, very high praise because he is highly devoted to the gods and to Lord Gwyn. And then he's going to tell us about the relationship of between the knights and the dragons. And this is a really interesting dialogue here. He's going to tell us that the reason he thinks that dragon slaying is knighthood's highest calling is because it's so difficult to kill dragons, because scores of knights die for every one dragon that is slayed. And when you see your comrades perish at the hands of the dragons, when you fight the dragons, you go through all of these emotions. You go through hatred, exhilaration, pride, rage, and you come out of this crucible a better knight and a better warrior. So that's what he means when he says that dragon slaying is knighthood's highest calling. That means that the dragons are sort of the ultimate challenge, the ultimate wall to be climbed for a knight. Alright, he also appears to be resigned to his fate here in the tower. He's been in prison and he really kind of doesn't care anymore. As a matter of fact, he gives us his great bow and he says, I don't need it anymore. You know, what good is an old dog with no hairs to hunt? So apparently Kalameet was the last of the dragons that were troubling this land. He's not the last of the dragons, period, but maybe he's one of the last of the dragons that were truly powerful and truly a menace. We know that there are dragons in our time because we see undead dragons. There's Seath the Scaleless, and then there's other dragons roaming around in Lordran. So there's a little bit more dialogue that we can get from Gough, but before that, we're going to go into another area, and this is another new area in the downloadable content, and this is the area for PvP battles. And I didn't really do a lot of PvP in the arena. They made different kinds of PvP available. You can have duels, you can have death matches, and you can also have some team play. And they call this area the Battle of Stoicism, or Stoicism. And that is an interesting way to name this place. So Stoicism refers to being able to endure great pains or great hardships. And the word Stoicism comes from Stoics, and Stoics were a school of Greek thinkers that wanted to separate sort of the feelings and the emotions away from them, so that they can basically just be logical about things. And it's really interesting. There are different schools of Stoicism and different schools of thought, and you can read quite a bit about it. And I'm sure that there's people that can find some more ties between Dark Souls and Stoicism. But one of the really interesting things, and the developers were very smart when they did that, is that when you come up, when you touch that portal downstairs, you are transported to the PvP arena, and you are given an item, and that item is the purple Coward's Crystal, which I am having a little bit of problem finding here. And the description of that item is very, very interesting. And while it doesn't seem to say a lot, if you start to examine it, it tells you quite a bit. And it is actually a pretty important piece of lore. And it's going to tell you that victory in this battle once led to ancient Anor Londo, but even in the absence of its overseer, capitulation is a disgrace. So what this means is that victory in the past, in this battle, if you fought here and valiantly, if you distinguished yourself, there was somebody that oversaw the fight, and if you were good enough, they recommended you to Anor Londo, to Lord Gwyn. And I think this is how Lord Gwyn recruited his Silver Knights and recruited the Sentinels. If they fought in the Battle of Stoicism, and if they fought valiantly, they were noticed by Anor Londo, and they were brought there because they had sort of proven their worth in the Battle of Stoicism. And again, it's interesting, and I think that many battles, you had to fight many battles because Stoicism means that you have to endure many hardships, or pain over a long period of time. All right, so let's go back to Gough and see if we can get the last bit of dialogue from him. And again, we're going to find him carving away. And this time, he calls us the Legend of Humans. So, because we have beaten Kalameet, he holds us in higher standing. And then he starts telling us about the Abyss and the Dark, and the fact that it threatens to devour the entire land of Oolacille, and of course that the Abyss was the thing that tainted and eventually led to Artorias' death. He also says that the Dark is sort of unstoppable, and that it's almost fated that it will take over. And he confirms that it was the Oolacillians that brought the darkness and brought Manus upon themselves. But he also says, hey, Artorias tried it. If you want to give it a try, if you want to stop the Abyss, then you have to face Manus, the father of the Abyss, because the dark is actually coming or exuding from Manus himself, and you may not be able to save Oolacille, but at least you'll be able to slow the spread of the dark, and that might help things a little bit. But again, his last message to us is that it's almost fated that the dark will end up winning at the end, so that there's really nothing to do. And again, maybe that's why he's resigned here, and he really doesn't care that he's in prison, and he is gotten into wood carving. He's getting in touch with his creative side. And as a matter of fact, he asks us about the giant, because the giant is also a creator of art. The giant blacksmith in Anor Londo. So he's completely given up his warrior ways, and now he's more interested in art, and he would like to see the old chap, his friend, in Anor Londo. Alright, since Hawkeye Gough kept talking about his blacksmith buddy in Anor Londo, we decided to pay it a visit, so we're back in Anor Londo, and we are going to go talk to the giant blacksmith. And I don't think we've interacted with this NPC before. And here he is, and we are going to find out if he remembers, or if he remembers Hawkeye Gough from the past. So apparently this blacksmith is very, very ancient. And the blacksmith is more interested in the crystal ember that we got from the Duke's archives. And he's going to be very happy making shiny weapons. So we continue to talk to him. We are hoping that he's going to tell us a little bit something about Gough, but he doesn't really say anything. Again, we're just going to give him the crystal ember, and now he is very, very happy because he can make weapons shiny, and he can make crystal weapons. So there's something brutish or something less developed about this giant. He doesn't want to talk quite a bit. He's just interested in his trade. He's interested in his in blacksmithing, and this is a little bit of obscure or secret loot here. If you go around him, we will find this treasure chest, and inside there is a ring. and that is the hawk ring. And if you read the description for the hawk ring, it will tell you that it was it belonged to Hawkeye Gough, who led the great archers, and that his arrows that were shot by Gough's great bow were used to take down high-flying dragons. So Gough, so Gough apparently did know this giant, and either this giant or this giant's father or grandfather or somebody down the line was in touch with Hawkeye Gough and passed down his ring. So maybe Hawkeye Gough did come visit his friend at some point, or maybe the giant visited Hawkeye Gough. But anyway, somehow these two were in contact with each other, and Hawkeye Gough gave his hawk ring to this giant blacksmith for safekeeping. But it's interesting to note the difference between the blacksmith and Hawkeye Gough. Hawkeye Gough is very intelligent, very wise, a great warrior. But this blacksmith is, he's a great blacksmith, and he can make lightning weapons, and he can make weapons for the gods. But he is not as advanced as Hawkeye Gough. At least in speech, he, you can assume that he's not as intelligent as Hawkeye Gough. He's more childlike. So maybe Hawkeye Gough is different from other giants. We don't know if all giants are sort of childlike, and it's only Hawkeye Gough that's sort of wise and more adult. Alright, so we are back in Oolacille Township, and it's too bad that the developers didn't go back and fix the dialogue for the giant, since Hawkeye Gough asks specifically about the blacksmith in Anor Londo. It would have been nice if the developers would have let you have different dialogue from the giant if you went back to him after talking to Hawkeye Gough in the past, but they decided not to do that. Although they did change the dialogue for or the events for a couple of other NPCs, and I'll talk about that later in a little bit. All right, so let's go talk to Hawkeye Gough for the last time, and I guess the last thing that's left to do is get his armor. And this was, normally I really don't mind killing NPCs, but this was a difficult thing for me to do, guys. But I wanted to show you guys his armor. So I'm going to talk to Gough for one last time, and then I'm going to show his armor. And the reason I'm going to show his armor is because it's going to help us explain why it is that he's imprisoned here in the tower, and what that red stuff is on his face, and why it is that he is blind. So he doesn't have any more dialogue. We've gotten all the dialogue out of him. Now he's just going to keep repeating his thoughts about the old Anor Londo, blacksmith. So we're gonna go with our favorite here, Power Within, followed by Great Magic Weapon, and we are going to try not to get killed, because Gough turns out to be actually a pretty tough enemy, and that's because he does wrestling moves, which makes sense because he is blind, he can't see. So he is going to try to use his body, as a weapon and occupy as much space as possible. And since he can't see you, he's going to try to feel his way around battle. Anyway, we are going to pick up his armor, and you are going to look very funny when you put his armor on, because it's so big. And the helm is going to tell us that the eye holes were packed with tree resin by those who dismiss Gough as a brutish giant. So when Gough came to Oolacille, probably helping Artorias with his battle against the Abyss, so he followed Artorias here as well as Karen. Anyway, when he did that, the Oolacillians dismissed him as they probably thought he was another childlike giant similar to the blacksmith, and they didn't think that he was going to be able to help, so they just dismissed them and they locked him up in a tower, and they said, you're just a brutish giant, you're not going to be able to help. And Gough really didn't care, because based on the dialogue, he is resigned to his retirement. There are no more dragons left, and he really doesn't think that the advance of the dark, the advance of the Abyss can be defeated or can be stopped. So he is resigned to the fate of the world, that eventually the dark will take over and white fight it. And we know that, I guess the only open question is, does he know if there is tree resin in his helm? Or is he indeed a little bit brutish and he doesn't realize, he thinks that he's blind? And I don't know about that. Maybe, again, it could be that he just doesn't care. He is sort of, he's given up, he's retired from fighting, he doesn't have that purpose anymore. And like he told us himself, it might be fated for the dark to never be able to be stopped. So what's the point in fighting it? Alright guys, that is going to do it for this episode. This is the Tech Phantom signing off.